One swipe changed everything. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't smirk. He simply slid the black card across the table like it was nothing, a quiet flex wrapped in confidence. Cameras leaned in. Producers held their breath. Across from him sat a single mother with tired eyes and folded hands, her posture trained by years of shrinking herself in rooms like this. This was supposed to be a lesson. 24 hours. Unlimited credit. One woman chosen to represent the poor. One billionaire determined to prove that struggle is a choice. He framed it as generosity, as curiosity, as data. But everyone in the room understood the real subtext. This was a test, and failure was expected. Card stopped inches from her fingers. A symbol of access most people never touch, let alone control. Online opinions ignited instantly. Some called it charity, others called it cruelty disguised as content. A few whispered what many were thinking: this wasn't bravery, it was bait. She didn't reach for it right away. She looked at it the way someone looks at a locked door, calculating risk, consequence, dignity. The billionaire watched closely, certain the next 24 hours would confirm everything he already believed about discipline, priorities, and worth. But what no one noticed, not the cameras, not the crowd, not the man with a card, was the weight she was already carrying. Into that moment, the invisible math she'd been doing for years. The sacrifices that never made headlines. The truth that poverty doesn't announce itself loudly. To him, this was theory meeting reality, a controlled experiment staged for applause. To her, it was survival under a spotlight. Every choice magnified. Every stereotype waiting to be confirmed. Every mistake punished twice, once by the system, and once by the audience watching silently in real time. And before that card ever touched her hands, there was a truth about her life no one in that room wanted to see. 2 lives. One impossible gap. They could not have been more different, and that was the point. On one side sat a man the world calls self-made. A billionaire who built an empire from grit and timing, praised in business magazines, quoted on podcasts, applauded for his discipline. Wealth had wrapped him in certainty. It insulated him from doubt, from urgency, from ever having to ask what something cost before deciding he needed it. He spoke about poverty the way people speak about weather and fortune, and inconvenient, but ultimately manageable with the right preparation. Across from him sat a woman no one had ever interviewed before, a single mother whose name rarely made it past first impressions. Overworked, underpaid, overlooked. Her days began before sunrise and ended long after her children slept. Bills stacked faster than paychecks. Childcare decisions that felt like moral tests instead of logistics. Every purchase a negotiation. Every mistake unforgiving. She knew the sound of a declined card, the heat of eyes behind her in line, the quiet humiliation of pretending it didn't matter to the world watching. She was a statistic, a cautionary tale, a comment section favorite. People typed confidently, from couches and offices, saying things like she should have planned better, worked harder, budgeted smarter. They spoke as if survival were a spreadsheet instead of a daily act of endurance. Others pushed back just as fiercely, reminding them that you can't budget your way out of a system designed to keep you one step behind. What cameras didn't capture was her restraint, the way she apologized for taking up space, the dignity she carried despite being treated like a lesson instead of a person. She wasn't asking to be saved. She was asking to be seen. The billionaire watched her with curiosity more than compassion. He believed numbers never lie, and if given access, anyone could rise. In his mind, this experiment would expose habits, not humanity. He didn't see malice in his thinking. He saw logic. That difference in worldview hung heavy in the air, thick with judgment, anticipation, and the quiet comfort of privilege, untested. But logic looks different when you've never had to choose between groceries and gas, or between staying home with a sick child and keeping a job that barely pays rent. The gap between them wasn't just money. It was experience. It was safety. It was the luxury of believing the world is fair. And when the billionaire finally explained why he chose her, the room went silent completely. The experiment that was never fair, he explained it like a TED talk, smooth and rehearsed, the confidence of a man who had never doubted his conclusions. Poverty, he said, wasn't destiny. It was decisions. Bad habits repeated long enough to feel like oppression. Given access, given opportunity, given just a little discipline, anyone could change their life. This experiment was proof. not punishment. Or so he claimed. The rules were simple and cruel in their simplicity. 24 hours, unlimited spending, no guidance, no restrictions. Every purchase would be tracked, broadcast, dissected. The audience would see exactly where the money went, and at the end, conclusions would be drawn. He framed it as transparency. Others heard surveillance. The cameras didn't blink, and neither did the expectations already stacked against it. Online. The verdict arrived before the challenge even began. People predicted luxury bags, impulse buys, wasted chances. They spoke with certainty, as if they had already lived her life. The billionaire absorbed the applause and skepticism alike, convinced that whatever happened next would reinforce the story he already believed. His confidence edged into arrogance, or loud, but unshakable. When the card was officially placed in her hand, the weight of it was heavier than its thin metal frame. This wasn't temptation, it was exposure. She understood what was really being tested wasn't her spending, but her worth. Every choice would be judged through a lens that had never been kind to women like her. Especially mothers who were expected to be grateful, invisible, and perfect all at once. She didn't hesitate, because she was greedy. She hesitated because she was afraid. Afraid of confirming stereotypes. Afraid of making the wrong choice for the right reason. Afraid of what would happen when the clock ran out and the world moved on without her. But she also knew what desperation teaches you, that refusing an opportunity doesn't make you noble. It just makes you poorer. In that moment. She thought of overdue notices tucked into drawers, of teachers' emails she hadn't answered yet, of nights spent calculating numbers that never quite worked. She thought of how often she had been told to wait her turn, to be patient, to trust a system that had never trusted her back. This wasn't a game to her, it was a mirror, and it was unforgiving. So she accepted, not with excitement, but with resolve. She straightened her shoulders and nodded, as if agreeing to another shift she couldn't afford to skip. The billionaire smiled, satisfied, already imagining the lesson he would deliver at the end. He saw a countdown to validation. She saw a countdown to survival. The timer began, bold numbers flashing, each second loud enough to feel like pressure. 20 hours suddenly felt impossibly small. The room buzzed with anticipation, commentators lining up their takes, viewers refreshing feeds, waiting for the moment she would slip. The experiment was underway, and everyone was watching the clock instead of the context. She stood up slowly, her card clenched in her hand, not as a prize, but as a responsibility. There was no safety net if this went wrong, no billionaire life to return to, no cushion of forgiveness. Just one day, one chance, and a world eager to be proven right. Every step forward felt heavier than the last. The clock was already winning, ticking louder inside her chest, daring her to fail publicly, daring her to confirm every assumption. They held about her completely alone, now permanently, and when she finally walked out of the room, the first place she went shocked everyone watching. She didn't spend it the way anyone expected. The doors closed behind her and the guessing began immediately. Commentators leaned forward, ready for spectacle. This was the moment everyone thought they understood. A sudden taste of freedom. Or at least they expected indulgence, maybe even revenge spending, something flashy enough to justify their assumptions. Instead, the first stop was a grocery store, not gourmet aisles or luxury brands, but bulk rice, fresh produce, diapers, cleaning supplies. Enough food to last weeks, not days. Enough to breathe. She moved with purpose, calculator out, checking prices, the way muscle memory demands. There was no thrill in it, only relief. Online, confusion replaced confidence. Viewers rewound clips, waiting for the twist that never came. Next came the bills, past due notices that had followed her for months like quiet threats. Electricity, phone, rent, balance shaved down just enough to stop the bleeding. Each payment wasn't dramatic, but it was surgical. Poverty, she showed, is a series of small emergencies stacked on top of each other, not one grand failure. Then the car. A check engine light she had learned to ignore because panic cost money too. She didn't upgrade, she repaired. Enough to make it safe, enough to keep her working, enough to keep everything from collapsing. The mechanic didn't recognize her from the stream, but he saw the same thing everyone eventually would. Someone buying stability, not status. She walked into a discount store next, gathering notebooks, backpacks, pencils. School supplies she'd been stretching since last year. Her children's names were written carefully on each item, as if claiming space in a system that rarely made room for them. In those quiet aisles, the narrative shifted again. This wasn't waste. This was foresight. The comments began to change tone. Slowly at first, then all at once. People who had been waiting to judge found themselves pausing. Where she's not wasting it. This is actually heartbreaking. Screens filled with realizations people weren't prepared to have. That access doesn't turn people reckless. It reveals how much they've been holding together with nothing. Some viewers admitted discomfort. They recognized themselves in the earlier skepticism, the easy assumptions. Others shared stories of their own parents, their own childhoods, moments, when a single repaired car or paid bill changed everything. The broadcast became less about her and more about a system. People had learned to normalize without questioning. Then she did something no one predicted. She stopped at a small apartment complex and knocked on a familiar door. Another mother. Same struggles. Same exhaustion. She handed over groceries, a little cash, no explanation for the cameras. Just solidarity. Because when you live close to the edge, you recognize others doing the same. The billionaire watched in silence now. This wasn't the story he'd outlined. There was no chaos, no proof of irresponsibility. Only a series of choices rooted in care, restraint, and long-term thinking. Each purchase chipped away at the myth that poverty is a personal failure. Each decision reframed the entire experiment. For the first time, the narrative slipped out of his control, and the power imbalance began to reverse. Not through confrontation, but through quiet competence that no amount of money could interrupt or spin away. It unsettled everyone who believed generosity always flowed downward without resistance there. What she bought wasn't luxury. It was margin, time, safety, dignity. And as the hours passed, something uncomfortable settled over the broadcast. The audience wasn't watching a test anymore. They were watching a mirror. And then she made one decision that completely changed the tone of the experiment. The purchase that made him uncomfortable. She walked away from the groceries, the bills, the repairs, and the school supplies, carrying only the card. Her resolve, and a sense of purpose the cameras could never fully capture. Then she paused, thinking not about herself, not about a luxury, not about proving anyone wrong. She thought about opportunity, about what money could mean if it was used to lift someone else from the invisible traps of life. Her next stop was a local community center, a place she knew well. A single mother ran a small program there, helping children with tutoring and providing resources no one else seemed to prioritize. The center was struggling, teetering on the edge of closing. She handed over a portion of the card's funds to cover tuition, books, and supplies for dozens of children. She didn't ask for recognition. She didn't linger. She just did it. The billionaire noticed immediately. At first, he raised an eyebrow, curious. Then, as she explained what she was doing, his curiosity turned to unease. Why? He asked, almost gently, but his tone carried an edge. This wasn't the experiment you were supposed to. I know exactly what this is, she said calmly, holding his gaze. You gave me this to see what I would do for myself. But what I need isn't just for me. This money can buy someone else a chance they wouldn't otherwise get. And sometimes, helping others is the most responsible way to use it. Money isn't the same as security. Security is what we make of it for ourselves and the people around us. Her voice was steady, humble, but firm. Each word landed heavier than any criticism, heavier than any accusation. She wasn't lecturing. She wasn't defiant. She was naming a truth the billionaire had never experienced. Wealth grants freedom, yes, but it cannot teach empathy. It cannot teach the long, exhausting arithmetic of survival. It cannot teach dignity preserved under strain. He blinked. The room fell silent. The staff, the commentators, even the hidden cameras seemed to pause in collective hesitation. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. It was as if her reasoning had cut through layers of expectation and judgment, leaving only clarity. The arrogance he carried into the room, a quiet, unassuming certainty, was faltering, and in its place, something unfamiliar settled. Reflection, recognition, a touch of shame. Comment sections began to light up. She's right, one typed. This is different than anything I expected. Others nodded in agreement, posting stories of their own parents, their own small acts of unseen courage. People stopped waiting for a mistake and started paying attention to meaning. He tried to speak again, more sharply this time, testing the boundaries of her calm. But isn't this irresponsible? You're not spending it for yourself? I'm responsible because I know the cost of survival, she replied. Wealth only buys options. Decisions make security. And sometimes, the best decision is to create opportunity for someone who doesn't have a choice. For a moment, the billionaire's posture stiffened, then slumped slightly, as though the words had pressed against something inside him that hadn't been tested before. The experiment he had designed to showcase control, judgment, and hierarchy now showcased humility, foresight, and courage instead. And as the final hours loomed, the tension thickened. The cameras captured every step, every word, every unspoken question. The clock ticked louder in the background, but no one could predict what she would do next, because what happened in the final hours is what no one, especially him, was ready for. When the internet turned by mid-afternoon, clips of her quiet decisions began circulating online. The grocery aisles, the paid bills, the repaired car, the school supplies, each moment replayed in slow motion, shared, analyzed, celebrated. People who had logged on expecting spectacle instead encountered dignity. The narrative was shifting in real time, and the billionaire could feel it, even from behind the cameras. No hashtags could contain the surprise. Hashtag not what we expected trended within hours, comment sections transformed. Those who had eagerly predicted failure now paused to reconsider. She's managing chaos better than I manage my budget. One post read, "This is actually heartbreaking." Another admitted, the honesty cutting through layers of preconceived judgment. Influencers, initially ready to mock, started reshaping the conversation. Threads emerged discussing the reality of survival, the weight of parenting on a single income, the invisible labor of keeping a household upright when the odds are stacked against you. Tweets reframed poverty not as laziness, but as a relentless fight. Threads comparing her choices to calculated acts of triage spread quickly, challenging long-held assumptions. The billionaire's image, once untouchable, began to wobble in public perception. No one denied his wealth or power, but the story was no longer about him. His experiment, designed to validate him, was validating her instead. He watched quietly. From the corner of the room, arms crossed, lips pressed tightly. No commentary, no notes, no posturing. For the first time in the experiment, he wasn't controlling the narrative. He observed, unsettled, as people celebrated someone he had expected to fail. His carefully curated hierarchy, the certainty of his judgments, the smooth control of the story all slipping through his fingers without drama, without spectacle, without chaos. Online, apologies began appearing in comment threads. I judged too quickly. I never considered the weight of her choices. I didn't understand. The collective voice of the internet, the people who had been waiting for her to falter, were instead confessing, reflecting, awakening. Empathy spread faster than any criticism, and it was impossible to ignore. Viewers began to speculate. What? Had the billionaire learned? Did he finally see what survival truly meant? Was he humbled, or merely inconvenienced by the reality that the person he underestimated had just rewritten the narrative entirely? The mother moved through her remaining tasks with quiet purpose. She smiled at the small victories, helping another struggling parent, securing a child's future with a single payment, completing the errands that had once seemed impossible. Each act amplified her unexpected influence, a ripple that reached far beyond the cameras, the studio, and the boardroom. And then came the final receipt, the one that made him put his head down. Receipt that broke him when she returned. The room held its breath. The card slid across the table, but it was no longer a symbol of challenge or judgment. It was a statement. She didn't spend it all. She didn't even need to. The excess wasn't a temptation. She couldn't resist it. Was a tool she had used wisely, deliberately, and without fanfare. I'm done, she said softly, almost apologetically. Not because I couldn't use more, but because what I needed wasn't access. It was stability. It was respect. It was being trusted to make choices for my family and my community without being watched, judged, or measured by someone else's expectations. The billionaire froze. His carefully measured expressions faltered, then crumbled. The certainty, the control, the invisible armor of privilege all gave way to something human, something raw. Tears formed in his eyes, unspoken, uncontrolled. No cameras could capture the depth of the shift within him. No commentary, no prepared speech, could explain the weight of what he was seeing. A lesson in humility delivered without drama, without demand, without malice. The room remained silent, the audience invisible yet present, holding their collective gasp. He had built empires, brokered deals, measured success in numbers and headlines, but here, at this table, he was undone by choice, courage, and quiet dignity. The hero had not fought him with words, nor with rebellion, nor with spectacle. She had simply lived with integrity, and in doing so, rewrote the rules of the experiment. Commentators whispered, online viewers paused mid. People who had been ready to mock now sat stunned, reconsidering everything they thought they knew about poverty, resilience, and human worth. The hero's victory wasn't loud or ostentatious, it was absolute, unassailable, and undeniable. She had not only survived the test, she had transcended it. Every handout, every thoughtful purchase, every act of care had led to this moment, a billionaire humbled, a world watching, and a reminder that power alone cannot teach understanding. Silence hung heavy, charged with AEW recognition, and the rare, almost sacred weight of truth. And just when it seemed the story had reached its peak, when every expectation had been shattered and every lesson learned, the tension held, because the story didn't end there. What this taught a nation, the story spread like wildfire, not because of wealth or spectacle, but because it revealed a truth too often ignored. Poverty is not failure. It is the weight of having no margin, no safety net, no room to breathe. The mother had shown that resilience, dignity, and care are not measured in dollars. They are measured in choices made under pressure, in quiet courage, and in the generosity extended even when resources are scarce. The billionaire, for the first time, understood that wealth alone cannot define value. He committed quietly, privately, to change not just in public image, but in action. Systems could be improved, structures could be challenged, and voices often silenced could finally be amplified. He had witnessed firsthand what happens when opportunity meets responsibility, and he could not unsee it. The mother walked away unchanged in character, carrying the same quiet strength she had before. But now the world saw, the world acknowledged her, and in that recognition, she became more than a participant in an experiment. She became a symbol, a reminder that survival is a skill, dignity is a right, and courage often looks like calm, deliberate action across social media, classrooms, workplaces, and communities. The lesson resonated. Generosity is not about grand gestures, and leadership is not about control. It is about empathy, vision, and understanding the humanity in every choice. Poverty is not shameful, and strength is not always loud. Sometimes the richest people in the room are the ones who never needed the card at all.